Good afternoon, or whenever you're watching this. My name is Frank Coppersmith. I chair Strategic Team 9, a strategic team established by the Mobilization Assistant to the Judge Advocate General, focused on recruiting and retention. Over the past year, our team has conducted more than 40 interviews and more than 100 hours of interview time, focused on helping better understand what's going on with the membership of the Air Reserve component, what it's going to take to recruit the next generation of leadership, and how do we keep the great folks that we have. So for right now, I'd like to take these next 20 minutes or so, dive into our findings, and hopefully help all of you who are now attending the senior leadership course really better understand what is going on out there amongst our Corps. So let's go ahead and get started. So our challenge was to develop a strategic model, a strategic plan around recruiting and retaining the millennial generation. We ended up focusing on two areas, really recruiting from the regular Air Force and finding ways to retain the current members of our Air Reserve component. But here's the challenge we've been facing. Over the past 5 years or so, admissions to law schools have been declining. This is a mix of both fewer students wanting to attend law school, dropping by thousands and thousands of students just since 2014. But even worse, the students are choosing to go to law school or actually scoring worse on the multi-state bar examination and also have lower LSAT scores. So what we're seeing is out there are fewer students who are really going to meet our needs, who are really going to meet our requirements to be members of the Air Reserve component. Of course, you can look at this another way. The other way to look at it is the ratio of people who apply to enter the service versus those who we ultimately access. As you can see, if you go back to the early 80s, we were seeing 2-3 applicants for every one that we had to join. Now it's almost 1-to-1. We're getting just barely enough applicants to cover all of our recruiting needs. Now the good news is, on the ARC side, we don't need a lot of folks. We only need to intake about 60 JAGs per year. Most of them come from active duty on the Reg Af side. And really that means we only need to get about 2 or 3 non-prior service each quarter. But the bottom line is there aren't enough Reg Af to fill the ARC ranks. And we're struggling filling the billets we have. While on the JAG side, we're sitting at about our traditional manning number of 85%. On the paralegal side, we slipped all the way down to about 70%. And we're seeing that fill rate to continue to decline. While it's not yet a crisis, it's definitely reaching a point where we need to put some serious attention on it. So who is it, this next generation that's coming up, that's going to start filling all of our ranks, and in fact is filling them now? Millennials today represent about 75 million people and about 24% of our workforce. But if you look at the literature out there, you certainly won't find a lot of positive things written about millennials as workers. You'll see terms like self-absorbed or uninvolved, disconnected, lazy, obsessed by their digital devices. So is any of this true? Is this right? And the answer is no. Of course not. What's really going on is that millennials have come up in an incredibly different world than those of us who grew up as Gen Xers. They've come of age during a time of radical technological change. It's not just mobile technology and faster computers, but the rise of social media as well. Globalization, where they can find information about the world at their fingertips and that the world affects their lives even at a very micro level. But also a time of great economic disruption. The joke of the barista with the master's degree is far closer to reality than we think. It's a workforce that's very heavily educated, deep in debt, and is struggling finding its place in the workforce and really in the world. They're also really the first generation of what Goldman Sachs here calls digital natives. That is, they're used to instant access to everything and all information all the time. Diving into a little bit more detail, when we look at millennials, we can see they've been born between 77 and 98, very racially diverse and incredibly well educated. But some of the challenges that they're facing on the economic front, some of the challenges they see in social media, where people put on their best possible selves, which may not reflect who they really are, have driven low levels of social trust, a dramatically low marriage rate compared to the boomer generation. They also tend to suffer from very high amounts of school debt and are working in what you and I might describe as the gig economy. They work often many small jobs all together, all accessed through their cell phone. They're not particularly religious, not particularly patriotic, and very little interest in military service. Some estimates put millennials at only generating about 1% of the entire generation has both the interest and the ability to serve. So why did this happen? Well, they grew up after 9/11, and during 9/11, they've seen incredible turmoil. And honestly, the parenting strategies used by the boomers didn't necessarily do them any favors. From the oft-told report of participation trophies all the way through to play dates, it has really changed how they've come of age. But now these folks have entered the workforce, and they've got a lot of concerns about finding a place where they can fit in. Some of their biggest is around Industry 4.0. This is the impact of the rise of artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, and many other technologies. They have a strong belief that no job will last very long, and they expect to leave any job that they might take in as little as 2 years. To that end, they actually want to assemble really a basket of jobs. They like assembling a group of different jobs, whether that's Uber and Favor and Lyft and TaskRabbit, to really put together a full portfolio of work, because they know that no one of them, if any one falls through, they won't be out of luck. They'll still have an income. They really like flexible working arrangements. They expect to work from home. They expect to work remotely. And they see that as driving a positive workplace culture. And they also like to get paid. They're very focused on making sure they get paid the right amount for the work that they do. And they're also equally concerned about getting the training they need so that they can stay involved and stay ready as technology continues to advance. But it's not just the millennial generation. During our research, we spent a lot of time learning about Generation Z as well. And Generation Z is not a group of mini millennials. This is a generation that is very, very different than the millennial generation. They've come of age during a recession, during a financial crisis, war, and terror threats, under a constant glare of social media, even as young children. They are very much like the silent generation because they've been hardened by economic and social turbulence. Today, we've got an incredible economy. Less than 4% unemployment, 3% growth. Gen Z is reaping these rewards, but they are focused on the downside. They are focused on what has gone before, and they have watched their families, their parents, and their older brothers and sisters struggle with work, school, debt, and they are very focused on financial security. They're not as much risk takers. They've done a good job of avoiding school debt. As hard as this is to believe, they are taking out dramatically less debt. It's been almost a 10% reduction in the amount of debt this generation is carrying. They're less likely to have tried alcohol, gotten a driver's license, or gone out regularly. At the same time, often due to social media, they're suffering from record levels of anxiety and depression. And that social media, though, gives them an interesting way of experiencing and working with computers. Those of us in Gen X are used to working with one screen. The millennial generation really is used to two. But the new Gen Z is used to 5 screens. Social media, work, live streaming Netflix, Tinder, all coming together, all at the same time, all consistent with their behavior, that they want to be able to move from one experience to the other seamlessly. But what's interesting is, even though they have this enormous tech savvy, they're not comfortable with face-to-face interactions. In fact, they prefer to text and not call. In fact, they often don't even know that a phone can be used for that. So as we took a look at this research that we've done, we knew we needed to turn it into something that the Air Force community could use. And so what we looked at doing was building a series of personas around the candidates that we wanted to reach. Now, a persona is nothing more than a representation of someone we want to influence. In this case, someone who we're hoping to join the ARC as either as an attorney or a paralegal. And a persona captures all of this important information around their motivations, their concerns, desires, the source of information, where they get the information they need. We put these together through a series of interviews, a set of standard questions, and then once we have these together, and we'll see some in just a moment, we're going to use those to help power our messaging and our outreach. We ultimately identified 6 personas, 4 focused on recruiting and 2 on retention, and we came up with very consistent findings through our interviews. So let's take a look at those personas now. Here's a little bit of definition of what those look like. We'll skip over this for now. And here are some of the questions we used to establish the personas. So here are the 4 personas we have focused on recruiting. Each of these is a different person. It's maybe a reg-aff who's a JAG, or maybe someone separating from a sister service, or maybe someone coming in with civilian experience. They have different questions, different concerns, different ways of being influenced. I won't read them now to you because you'll have access to this deck as you go forward, but this is a lot of great information around who these people are, how they think about the Air Force, and as you look to the people that are going to work for you and with you, if you get someone who is coming in with no prior service, obviously they have very different expectations and needs than someone coming in from the reg-aff. Similarly, on the retention side, we broke this into just 2 buckets, one for JAGs and one for paralegals. I found some really interesting differences here. The biggest challenge on paralegals, and there were some very different areas of focus there, was that many paralegals leave the Air Force with no intention of ever being a paralegal again. That makes recruiting very difficult, and even if we recruit them, it's hard to keep them around. That's a dramatic difference between their experience and that of the judge advocates. So why do people leave regular Air Force? Why do they move on? This is an important consideration for us. It's important because we understand why people leave. We have a way to build a message to convince them to come join us. The leading parts were disappointing professional work. We heard over and over again that attorneys, especially attorneys, were not excited about layup drug cases or sketchy sex assault prosecutions. There was also issues with leadership, issues with local leadership, with staff judge advocates and deputy staff judge advocates. One lesson from this has been taken to heart by the Air Force JAG School, that as they think about the training they provide to senior leaders, that there needs to be a focus on leadership, not just management, not just motivation, but inspiration. There's another piece where the reg-aff often becomes incompatible with personal life or school. Again, this is very clearly a line item from our paralegals who decide to go to college or decide to change their career or raise a family. We also collected quite a bit of data from the Air Force Survey Office. Lots of good data here. I'll leave it to your review. But one of the things that came out is that in the JAG offices, whether a paralegal or an attorney, job stress was cited more than the Air Force at large as a reason to separate. In some cases, dramatically more. As you see, 57% of paralegals cite work stress as a reason to leave. For the rest of the Air Force, that's only 43%. So what's exciting about the ARC? What is our message? What is our story to our community? And we heard a lot of great things. We heard about the ARC being a great gig, about liberation and freedom. I love the quote, "It's a perfect side hustle to my civilian career." That's very much a millennial focus. The idea that, yeah, I need a main job, but I need a backup too. The Air Force Reserves brings a terrific backup career. And then we get to add to it that it's interesting work that this person can't find elsewhere. If you're a civilian attorney, even if you're a prosecutor or a defense counsel, you come on active duty, you get to do fascinating work like targeting and other types of things in ops law. That's just not experience you can get in the civilian side. So what this means to us is that service is the key driver. This is our focus. But we have to balance that with flexibility and allow people to have some control over their lifestyle and career. And even though financial benefits were important, oddly enough, this never was the driver. It always came up in every interview as important, but it was never a primary focus. So really, what's the ARC story? What are we going to take in front of millennial generation and Generation Z? It's a great gig. A lot of satisfaction amongst reservists from a standpoint of the service and the work they do. There's also the ARC is a great place for you because you are a millennial. Millennials are looking for awareness and experience and a certain degree of self-development. The ARC can provide that. The ARC's about big ideas and life changes. It's about a path to service to your country, to your family, to your community. And it's also really interesting work, as we've talked about. The quote at the bottom came from an ARC member, and I thought it was too good not to share. That is, service in the ARC means you get to serve in the world's greatest military while staying rooted in your community, career, and family. But it's not all perfect, and we know that. People do leave the ARC on a regular basis. And it really came into two big buckets. The first was a disconnect between the ARC and candidly IMAs and the rest of the Air Force. For the most part, with the Cat A and National Guard folks we talked to, they were very satisfied with the work they did. IMAs, maybe not so much. IMAs maybe not always feeling like they're part of the team, feeling like they're contributing in a real meaningful way. But honestly, that was not the big driver. The one that came up over and over with people who had left, people who were considering leaving, and even people who said they would stay to the very end no matter what, was the administrative burden of being in the ARC. DTS, arrows, UTAPs, lack of access to Air Force email and Air Force systems, unpaid travel costs, the issues with Det 5. These were mentioned over and over and over again. So as you come in as a leader, as a senior leader, you can't fix arrows, UTAPs, or DTS. But what we can do and what we're going to have to do is help message to people that we're aware of these problems and we'll work the best we can to help them get through them. So our team came back with a long list of recommendations. The list on the left side of this slide outlines all of the things we were trying to do. We need to tell the ARC story so people understand, especially on the active duty side, why being an ARC is important. We need to address the reasons that millennials are joining the service: freedom, flexibility, independence, service. We need to use authentic messaging. And for that, we mean let's dial down JAGs standing in a law library holding a law book. Everyone knows that's not how we practice law. What we really want are showing people in real circumstances, telling them the truth, even if the truth is a little rough around the edges. We need to make sure we have good onboarding, get mentors assigned, and we do that now through the Junior Officer Council. We've got to use the right channels. So if people are looking for guidance from Twitter or Facebook, that's where we've got to go. We've got to leverage vignettes, quick stories, so that these are memorable. Remove the taboo about talking about active duty, talking about the reserves. The number of folks who said that they had to corner a reservist in a quiet area or at lunch is embarrassing. It's one team, one fight. We have to emphasize the benefits of the alumni network, talk about ARC ambassadorship every day. Every time we go out there, we are representatives of the ARC component. We're working on a life cycle model of recruiting and retention so that the right information and the right materials get in front of the right people at the right time. We intend to focus and expand our efforts at recruiting sister service personnel, especially from the services like the Navy that don't offer the same kind of opportunities in the ARC. And then really activate civilian job expertise. We've got some amazingly talented people out there. We want to surface them. Then the group on the right, that right side, are all some of the things that we're doing right now. And let's dive into some of those in just a minute. The first is we're putting out a detailed report of what we've learned in the reporter. The reporter now comes in an all-digital format that makes it flexible and more mobile. We're going to be doing a blended media report that includes videos from many of the interviews that we've done. It includes multimedia from like some of the data you're seeing in this deck and extended decks, as well as a detailed narrative that tells the story. We're also putting out separate articles on many of these topics. Major McPherson is putting together an article on what authentic messaging means and how we can use it. We're putting together a panel on managing and leading millennials. We've got podcasts and video recordings coming, and then we've got the video vignettes that we did at the Survey of the Law. Diving into these video vignettes briefly, when we were at the Survey of the Law just this past few weeks, we recorded a number of reservists from first lieutenants just joining all the way to some very senior officers, asking about their family and personal life, and how they blend the arc with important life moments, talking about their civilian career and their desire and ability to serve. It's all about surfacing information that people who we're trying to reach and influence want to know, but they want to get it authentically right from the source and not filtered through recruiting efforts. So I hope this has been helpful. This is an overview of the work that the team has done. As I leave you, I've just got some final pieces of advice as you go forward into your new leadership roles. The first, as you work with millennials and Gen Z, I want to encourage you to find ways to let them work remotely. This is a powerful benefit, and to the extent that we can do IDTs, paid or unpaid, help the Reg Af forces get work done, but give them that sense of flexibility, will really be speaking right to what millennials and Gen Z are looking for. The next piece of advice I have is try not to separate these digital natives from their digital devices. Now, many of us work in SCIFs, and if we do that, we know that that's absolutely going to happen. They've got to give up the device before they can go inside. But if you're base level office, don't be surprised if someone brings in their laptop or their tablet and maybe has something streaming in the background, because that's just how they work today. They're also expecting and needing faster career transitions. So the more that we can rotate people through roles like reserve coordinator, that's really important to keeping millennials and Gen Z engaged. Lastly, I think as we look ahead, the kind of carrots and sticks that we've used in the past may not be as effective. We're used to motivating people. Gen Z, millennials, they want to be inspired. And it's up to us to find ways to inspire them. That means it's not just telling them what we've got to get done and making sure they do it, even though readiness is very important. It's about showing them the path and living that path and helping be that mentor that they desperately need and looking for. And if we do these things, I think we're going to do a great job of building up the millennial generation and Gen Z into the leaders that we need. Again, we're not going to be around much longer. The Gen Xers, like myself, we're going to be retiring soon. And it isn't going to be that long before the entire workforce and the entire JI Corps is going to be nothing but these new generations. So thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I hope this information was helpful, and I'm open to answering any questions you might have. Reach out anytime, and I or someone on the team would be happy to speak with you. Thank you very much.